Hey everybody, Dean Giles here for this quick video on drum set notation. Now I know a lot of you, when you get started playing the drums, you don't really want to take a lot of time to learn how to read music, but I think if you just take a moment to be able to understand the notation, it'll really help you out in the long run. So the first thing we're going to look at are the notes and rests. In notation, we have two things. We have notes and rests. We have a note, and that means to play, and a rest, which means don't play or rest, okay? And most of the music that you're going to see as a beginning player is going to be in a 4-count cycle. So we're going to count up to 4, and then we're going to go back to 1 again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And this will continue all the way through an entire song like that, okay? And the function of how fast or slow those counts are will depend upon something that we call tempo, all right? And we have this instrument or this little device called a metronome, and you can get metronome apps for your phone and etc. But I have an old metronome here, and what it does, it gives off basically an audible click at a certain rate or a certain speed. Right now I have this one set up for 60 clicks per minute, and that's how we usually measure the tempo, is in clicks or beats or pulses per minute. And if we have it set up for 60 clicks or pulses per minute, that means it's going to click once every second. Let's just listen to that real quickly. Okay, so now the metronome has given us those steady clicks once every second, or 60 in a minute. And we're going to assign our counting to that, our numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, we come back, we're going to talk about how to play along to the metronome. Okay, I'm going to start off by turning the metronome on and listening to those pulses and getting a sense of the rate of the click, and then start to count, and then I'll start to play along with it. And I'm just going to use a simple hand pattern, right, left, right, left. Let's do that. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So the idea there is that I'm trying to line up with the metronome so that I can play as steady a rhythm as I possibly can. And that's everyone in the band's responsibility, to have a good, steady tempo, to be able to play along with a metronome like that. And this is what's going to give the music kind of its cohesiveness. It's going to make it so that everyone in the band kind of locks in together. So we're all playing together. If we're all playing at the same tempo, we're all going to kind of lock in together, and it's going to sound good when we do that. So you need to be able to play along to the metronome, count, and kind of be able to do that nice, steady pulses. And eventually we're going to take the metronome away, and you're going to be on your own doing it, okay? So use the metronome to help you get there, and then at some point we'll take the metronome away. But right now we're going to talk about another note value. Right there I was playing quarter notes because I'm assigning the quarter note to the click of the metronome. And now I'm going to play an eighth note with it. So it takes 2 eighth notes to make a quarter note. Eighth note is half as long as a quarter note is. So we need 2 of them to fill up that space of the quarter note. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to play the right hand only on the quarter note, and I'm going to fill in between with my left hand in order to play the eighth notes. You'll see what I mean here when we do this. So I'm going to start the metronome again, play the right hand to the clicks of the metronome, and then add notes in between those clicks. And those are going to be called eighth notes, okay? So here we go with that. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, quarter notes. 1, 2, 3. Now I'm going to switch to the eighth note. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and back to the quarter note. 1, 2, 3, 4. Eighth notes. 2, 3, and 4, and 1. So you'll notice that the eighth note is really kind of twice as fast as the quarter note. It takes 2/8 to make a quarter. So those eighth notes are going by really kind of twice as fast as the quarter note. Well, exactly twice as fast, really. So you can play any hand pattern with these note values, with the quarter note, with the eighth note, with any note value, that you are working with. You can use any hand pattern. There I was just playing right, left, or all rights for the quarter note. Well, I could play, a variety of different hand patterns. For instance, let's do one measure of single strokes, or right, left as eighth notes, and then I'll do the next measure as right, left as eighth notes. Okay, let's do that real quick. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4. Back to singles. 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and. So I hope you noticed that no matter what I did there in terms of changing my hand pattern, the eighth notes remained eighth notes. We didn't change anything with the notes. We just changed the hand pattern. So I could play eighth notes on the bass drum with my right foot. I could play them on a cymbal. I could play them on the floor tom. Anywhere on any of the instruments that come within the drum set, we could play eighth notes, or we could play quarter notes. Okay, and this is how we kind of start to build our rhythmic vocabulary. So one of the things you're going to see in learning how to play the drums is something that we call dynamics. And within the umbrella of dynamics, we have these things called accents. And basically an accent is picking out a note or several notes that are louder than other notes. So in our 4-count cycle, what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to put an accent on the 1 count. So we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to emphasize or accent that first count. Okay, so let's do that. Let's play the accent on 1, and I'll play eighth notes to the quarter note click. Okay, here we go. 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and 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 1, and 2, and 3, and 4, and. Okay, so you're going to see that a lot in drum set notation. You'll see that accent, and it looks kind of like a V that's sitting on its side, sort of like that, over the note. So when you see that, that's an accented note. And one of the tricks to playing accents is really to lower the volume of all the other notes. Okay, so if you're all up here playing notes and then you have an accented note, you're going to have to go like that to try to get it. So if you just lower everything else, then it's easier to get the accent to come out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Now we're going to look at this device that's called the staff, and the staff is made up of lines and spaces between those lines. They're horizontal lines, and there are 5 lines and 4 spaces in between the lines. And this is the grid, or the place that we put the notes. And you're going to see some graphics coming up here on the screen. And the notes could be either on a line, or they could be in between the 2 lines on a space, or inside on a space. They could also be above the staff or below the staff. And also the notes themselves could have different types of what we call note heads, or the part of the note where the placement is. So most of the time it's kind of like an oval or round filled in circle type thing, or an filled in oval. But you could change that up and have an X or a diamond, or you could have an X with a circle around it. And all those things are going to mean something slightly different in drum or percussion notation. Also, most of the time when you see a piece of music, they're going to have what's called a key or a legend that lets you know what each one of those things means in that particular piece of music or in that notation. Unfortunately, percussion and drum notation isn't entirely standardized. I mean, there are some common practices, and I think with some experience, you can figure it out. Okay, so now we're going to take a look at the notation for a basic rock groove. And when you look at this notation, you'll see that there are notes that are above the staff, above the fifth line. You'll see that there are some notes within the middle of the staff there, and then some way at the bottom. And depending upon where those notes are placed, it's going to mean a certain instrument on the drum set. The notes above the staff usually will mean to play on a cymbal, like a ride cymbal or a hi-hat or a crash cymbal or something like that. The notes inside the staff will usually mean to play the snare drum or the tom-toms, and then a note near the bottom of the staff will probably mean the bass drum. And when we look at this drum set notation for a basic rock groove, we see these notes above the fifth line, and they have an X for the note head. And that is going to mean to play on the hi-hat or ride cymbal. And since it's a groove, we're probably going to interpret that as being on the hi-hat to start off with or on the ride cymbal. So let's just say that's going to be the hi-hat. We're going to play those notes on the hi-hat. You'll also notice that there are 8 of them in the groove there. Those are eighth notes, like we were doing before, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and we're going to play all those at a certain tempo, whatever tempo is chosen by the metronome or the composer or whatever, that we're going to play those eighth notes on the hi-hat. Okay, now underneath the counts of 2 and 4, you'll see a note that's in the middle of the staff, and that has a regular note head on it, an oval filled in note head, and that's going to be played on the snare drum. And usually, again, in the legend or key for this piece of music, it will say that the note in that space is the snare drum. They're just indicating that's the snare drum. And the notes above are the hi-hat or ride cymbal. So we have the snare drum now played on counts 2 and 4 along with the cymbal above. So they're stacked there. You can see the cymbal with the X above, and then underneath the 2, you see that other note in the middle of the staff, and underneath the 4, you have the same representation of the snare drum there. Now below the staff, or down at the bottom of the staff there, you see the bass drum, and that's on counts 1 and 3. So as we start to play this groove, we know that we're going to have a bass drum on 1 along with a cymbal. And then the and of 1 underneath the plus sign there, which is what we call the and of 1, we're going to have just the cymbal by itself. And then on count number 2, we'll have a cymbal and a snare drum. And then on the and of 2, we'll have just a cymbal by itself. And the second half of this groove just repeats the first half of it. Now that's not always going to be that way, but in this particular groove, that's what you have there. You have an identical second half for counts 3 and 4 as you did for counts 1 and 2. Now let's take a look at what it would be like to play that particular drum groove on the drum set. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and So now we've covered what it's like to see notation for the snare drum or drum pad playing quarter notes or eighth notes. We've seen how we can take those eighth notes and play them on a cymbal, and then add a snare drum on a 2 and 4 count and the bass drum on the 1 and 3 count. So we have a groove and we have a kind of like a snare drum idea. Now let's look at what it's like to notate or read the notation for a drum fill, like when we go around the tom-toms and things like that, or hit cymbals and stuff, outside of playing a regular steady groove or beat. And you'll notice that now the notation for the tom-toms is going to find its way in between in the middle of the staff there. We're going to have the first tom or the highest pitched tom near the top of the staff, and then the middle pitched tom near the middle of the staff, and the lower pitched tom near the bottom of the staff. So we want to think of things that have high sounds near the top and things that have low sounds near the bottom. So sometimes you may see the tom-toms notated in a couple different ways. You might see the note inside of a space, or you might see it on a line. A lot of times what I like to do in my notation, and I don't do this all the time, but sometimes I do it, where I actually put a circle around the note so that you can easily see that it's a tom-tom as opposed to the snare or bass drum. So let's go to the drums now and play a simple fill around the tom-toms as we check the notation. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Okay, so now we've covered quarter notes and eighth notes on the practice pad or snare drum and what the notation looks like for that. We've looked at a drum groove, and we've also looked at a drum fill, or what it's like to play around the toms and what the notation looks like for that. So that kind of wraps it up for this quick video on drum set notation. Sure hope it's going to help you out as you look at information that you might get in a book or on the internet or from your instructor, and I'll see you on the next video.